now.
Hi, my name is Tomas Herman Palacios with the Heart Focused Life and the Rise Wellbeing practitioners. And I am interviewing Dr. David Lamson today. Dr. David Lamson is the founder and owner of Z Chiropractic. Dr. David Lamson works in several areas to help people improve their wellness and health. He helps people improve their sleep, their immune function, their blood pressure. He helps women with prenatal and postpartum issues. He works on babies, children, and adults, and adults specifically who have back pain, neck pain, arthritis, and so much more. Welcome, Dr. David Lamson. Hi, David. How are you
Hey,
today?
Tomas, good to see you. Thank you for that wonderful intro.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's always wonderful to see you, and yeah, I'm so happy that we could get this time together to have this interview today.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to sharing whatever wisdom I have and helping people on their path to health and healing.
So I would like to know, can we start? Could you tell us, your story? How did you come to the path where you're at today? What led you to becoming a chiropractor and helping people with all of these different wellness issues that they have?
Well, it really started when I was little. I mean, I was probably in even elementary, middle school, I would get sick all the time. I had asthma, so I'd go play soccer, and I was a pretty active kid, but I would get asthma attacks. I'd get sinus infections, and then that would turn into bronchitis, and then I'd be sick for, sometimes 2 or 3 weeks, and I'd be out of school. And it was kind of a pain. As much fun as it was getting out of school sometimes, I was just sick of being sick. And I kept going to the doctor. The doctor, who was a well-known pediatrician in Seattle, kept giving me antibiotics. And after doing this for years and years, I finally said, hey, is there anything I can do to kind of change this from getting these sinus infections that then will turn into bronchitis because it goes into my lungs? And he said, well, nutrition has no impact on your health, because I asked him, can I change my diet? What kind of lifestyle stuff can I do? And he says, nutrition has
Wow.
no impact on your life and your health. And he said, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to drill holes into your sinuses to enlarge your sinuses so that you can drain better. And I was in 7th grade. And even as a 7th grader, that seemed completely nuts to me. And so it started me on this path to investigate about health. And luckily, my parents were somewhat holistic, and they basically, someone recommended in the family that I go to a chiropractor. And so I went to this chiropractor in Seattle, Eric Kloss, and he basically had this talk. And so he was giving these talks to his community on health and vitality. And so he started talking about the fundamentals of health. And I learned about, why we get cancer, or, why do we get mucus and sinus issues and asthma and things like that? And what are the fundamentals to kind of healing that? I started getting under chiropractic care. My nervous system was getting checked. I was getting adjusted regularly. I changed my diet. And those were basically the two only things that I did. And it totally transformed my health. I went from being sick all the time to being sick very, very rarely. My asthma going away, basically, like where I could play soccer again, and I didn't have, I didn't collapse on the field because I couldn't breathe. It was literally life-changing. And I said, how come everyone doesn't know this? This is insane. And so I literally started, even as a 7th grader in middle school, going to this naturopathic library. There was an amazing school called Bastyr University in Seattle. It's a world famous naturopathic college. And so I started going into the library as this little kid and going through the library and searching for kind of the truths on healing, on herbs, on diet, nutrition. And I started just becoming a little scholar on natural healing. And so I really just became fully engrossed in that. And really said, hey, I want to be a chiropractor when I graduate from school. And that was kind of a vision that I had. And so, I went into high school, and I kind of struggled with school because I was, dyslexia was kind of something I struggled with. And so I was always kind of tentative about going to more grad school. And so I kind of veered off a little bit from my vision of becoming a chiropractor. And it really wasn't until later on that I was able to kind of realize that this is something that I can do and I can make a huge impact in the world. And so I finally was able to do that. And it was some other teachers that taught me along the way to kind of overcome the dyslexia and the learning disabilities, and be able to kind of survive and thrive in chiropractic school, which was tough. We had over 500 exams in chiropractic school. So that was a real journey for me, and kind of began me on my path to becoming a chiropractor.
That's an incredible story. So your whole journey in becoming a chiropractor and helping people to improve their health and well-being began when you were probably about 12 years old, finding your purpose then, and then really living through to that till today is absolutely incredible. What that makes me think about is kind of, right now we're in the midst of a global pandemic. There's a lot of divide politically. How do we thrive in our current climate with these uncertain times that we're in, and how do we build our health and our vitality?
Great question. I think, one, just checking into your own body, what's going on in your system. There's so much anxiety and anxiousness. I think we're all experiencing some form of anxiousness, even depression, sadness. There's so many emotions going on right now that it's all part of being human, and it's totally natural, especially with how much uncertainty there is. So, one, just moving your body, putting your hands on your chest or over your heart, and just taking a few deep breaths. And even just that settles the nervous system. This is really about, how is the nervous system responding to your environment? Are you really jacked up and just reactive to everything? Or are you able to kind of handle the chaos and the craziness of the world today? And your nervous system was made to be able to handle these things, was made to be able to thrive and adapt. And really, the fundamental of health is function and adaptability. And so as a chiropractor, the way that we address that is we check the nervous system. So we initially do an initial exam to see, how well is your nervous system functioning? Is there interference in that brain to body connection? Because literally everything in your body, from every organ, every muscle, everything in your body is connected via your neurology. And so when that is offline via that spinal cord, it can be from a slip or fall, car accident, and it can even be from watching the news, family dynamics. All these things are stressors on the body. And so the more stressors we have on the body, the more the body kind of needs a tune-up or a check-in. And so, a lot of times when I'm working with people, I'll feel kind of this electric tone that their nervous system is kind of just on fire. It's very reactive. And so one of the biggest things you can do is just tune into your breath, even just slowing the breath down, taking a pause at the beginning, at the end of the breath. That literally calms the nervous system down. And it's a good thing for me to do all the time, because sometimes I start talking too fast. I get too excited. So just taking that deep breath slows me down, slows anyone down, and really can hack into the neurology of your body, because we have this balance between, the sympathetic, which is our fight or flight response. It's how we, when we're getting chased by the tiger, we're running away. We need to be able to run fast and have our muscles working well. We don't need to digest things. We don't need to have kind of be able to rest. All these things are kind of put on hold for us to go into that sympathetic fight or flight state. And then the parasympathetic on the other side is the rest and digest. It's our reproductive system. And so there's this beautiful balance that happens. Now, what happens in our society is that we're kind of constantly triggered. So it could be the news, like I said, or family dynamics, or relationship dynamics, or what's going on around us in our community and the world, that triggers us to say, I'm not safe. And that is a fight or flight survival response. So even though it might be a mouse in the room, we're reacting like there's a tiger in the room. And that could be going on for, hours, days, but our bodies were only really meant to be in that state for literally minutes. In the wild Sahara, when a zebra is getting attacked or chased by a lion, they're in a fight or flight state. They're running maybe for 20 minutes. They survive or they live. If they live, they're back and grazing grass again. They're not taking it personally. Whereas we as humans, someone cuts us off in traffic and we take it personally for hours, days, weeks, months, our whole life. And then we are perseverating or just rethinking in that state of fight or flight that our body's not safe. And so what happens in that state neurologically is our brain literally shunts blood from that prefrontal cortex, from our higher thinking, our perspective, to our more survival brain. And so this happens all the time in relationships, on Facebook, in the news, whatever is that trigger that can get us into that survival state. And when we're in that survival state, we have no perspective. We can't see that this tiny little thing that's upsetting us is really, we're turning it into a huge thing. And so, taking the breath to calm things down, taking a walk, getting away from that situation, setting better boundaries. And chiropractic care is really beautiful because it really supports your body's own ability to heal. So it's not really me doing the healing. I'm just finding out where there's interference in that system, giving a gentle adjustment, and then letting the body do the rest. Because really the best doctor in the world is your body.
So let's unpack that just a little bit. So, you started off by saying, place your hands over your heart and take a deep breath. What's really happening in the body when I'm in that stressed fight or flight state, and then I take a deep breath and just kind of focus in that moment? What's going on? What am I switching from? How am I switching from this sympathetic fight or flight into this parasympathetic, and what's actually happening in here?
So we have kind of this almond-shaped thing called the amygdala that I'm sure you're familiar with. It's in the middle of the brain, and this is our kind of safety perception in our brain. So when our brain is constantly saying, am I safe? Am I safe? And so when we take that deep breath, you're not able to really take a deep breath when you're getting chased from the lion. So it's literally sending a signal to that amygdala, to the vagus nerve, which is one of our big organs that is also a safety response, that we can just, and literally every time you do that big breath, you can feel it in your body immediately. And so it's a huge hack into the body. Another simple thing you can do is even just rubbing the hands together like this until they're warm, and then putting them over your eyes. Now that is also sending a strong signal through the cranial nerves to relax your body. You're not going to have your eyes closed and be in that position when you are in a fight or flight situation.
Definitely not.
These are small hacks. Another thing is even just doing this, gently kind of rubbing this part of your chest, that stimulates the vagus nerve, which calms down the system. And
so you brought up the vagus nerve a couple times. What is the vagus nerve, and how does that impact our nervous system?
Yeah, great question. So really leading research is really showing us how important the vagus nerve response is in our body, and how our neurology goes beyond our brain. We have a whole mesenteric nervous system in our gut, in our heart. These are very complex systems we're only just starting to kind of get glimpses of understanding of. And so the vagus nerve is one of our largest nerves, and it kind of starts in the middle of our back at about T4 of the thoracics, right in between our shoulder blades. And so that nerve comes out in the rib cage and innervates the heart, the lungs, the digestive system, and also is in charge of safety. So when literally, if I change my posture to this, I'm inhibiting that vagus nerve. And so that's why, a chiropractic adjustment can really help stimulate that safety, because all of a sudden I go from being like this to all of a sudden being able to move in a kind of better posture where this open posture is a safety posture. And some of you might have heard about the Stanford studies that they did about power posture. So power posture is basically arms up like this or out to the side, shoulders back, head back. And just doing this for 30 seconds, 1 minute has a big neurological impact on the body through the vagus nerve. And that helps increase testosterone. Testosterone is both present in men and women and helps to give us adaptability in our neurology. And so, really important for us there.
That's super, super interesting. So taking these breaths, doing chiropractic, we're activating our parasympathetic nervous system. We're activating our rest and digest. How does that impact our overall healing? And what would you say our stages of healing actually are?
Great question. So, how the parasympathetic and sympathetic interact with our healing. So as I was saying, in that fight or flight state, that sympathetic tone of the body, which our body goes back and forth between that sympathetic and parasympathetic, this is where, our muscles are activated with adrenaline, with cortisol, which is a stress hormone. So we get super kind of jacked up so that we can run. So our digestive system is suppressed. Our heart rate goes up, our blood pressure goes up. All these things happen so that we have the energy to be able to evade danger. And so, but in that process, we also are suppressing healing. So healing, reproduction, all these things are not happening in this sympathetic state. On the other side, in the parasympathetic, this is where we rest and digest. This is where our digestion is upregulated. This is where reproduction is upregulated or is possible. This is where the digestion starts, our heart rate slows down. We're able to finally slow down and heal. And that's the big thing, is heal. In that parasympathetic state, that's where all the healing happens. It literally cannot happen when we're jacked up on that fight or flight state. And so many people are in that sympathetic time. And so they're constantly going to that fight or flight state, and no healing can happen. And that's why we really have an epidemic of people in autoimmune situations, in chronic inflammatory illness, in you name it. Basically, it's tied into that dynamic. And so chiropractic is really powerful at helping reduce that poor signaling to the brain that's causing the body to constantly go into that trauma state. And so, literally when people get adjusted, sometimes they'll spontaneously cry, or just emotions will come up. And that's actually a good thing, because a lot of those stored traumas from past experiences can be stored in the body. When we cannot integrate that situation, it's stored in the body, and it literally makes us do this into that safety position. And so literally sometimes you can even see people walking down the street. You can see kind of where their safety levels are at, how much are they in that kind of protective state, and how that's impacting their health. And they're literally stuck in that sympathetic state. They can't shift their life, and they can't heal. We're also seeing an epidemic of difficulty of people getting pregnant. And so that's partly because they're in that unsafe state. And so once they're allowed, their body can naturally go back and forth and go into that healing state. That's where all that potential exists.
That's really interesting. So many of the people that I come in contact with, clients, friends, family, it doesn't matter where our conversations starts out. We somehow get taken into this path with talking about the pandemic that's hitting the world right now, the division that we have in our political system, or something else that is going on in their life, and it just seems like they're stuck, absolutely stuck in what you're describing as the sympathetic nervous system, their fight or flight. And no wonder that we're suffering this pandemic. The whole world is stuck in this sympathetic side of their nervous system. what are some of the other things that we can do to kind of break that cycle, that trend of just being stuck in that fight or flight side of our nervous system?
So I think that this is really where a lot of addiction comes from, is that we're in this chaotic situation, with relationships, with family, with what's going on in the world, with our job, with money, all these things. And we can't deal with those emotions that are coming up. And so I'm a huge fan of nonviolent communication and the work that Marshall Rosenberg developed, because literally he looked at, like, what is the source of all conflict? And what he found was that it's kind of that demonizing thing, like, I'm right, you're wrong. We're constantly trying to come together and trying to convince the other side that, I'm right and you're wrong. And instead of seeing it like we're all human beings that are trying to get basic human needs fulfilled. And we
Absolutely.
might have kind of tragic strategies for doing that, but I can have empathy for where you're coming from, and that you're just trying to get your need for love or for connection or for safety. Right now, safety is a huge word, and many of us are coming to try to get that need for safety in different ways. And so how can I have empathy for your strategy to getting safety, which might be totally different than mine? And instead of trying to say, hey, you need to do this or not do this, which is so often happening now. So the first step of that is just being aware and going from making judgments of, you're being this or you're being that, or I'm being this, and just saying, what's going on in my body? I'm noticing just maybe some tension in my mid back, or I'm noticing, I'm just noticing like some tension in my system. I'm noticing maybe some sadness, maybe anger, having a vocabulary to describe what's going on in your system, and really owning that instead of trying to project it onto the other person. That's huge. And then the next step is really going into what's the emotion there. Like, so if it's sadness or anger or frustration, and then what's the need behind that emotion, which could be a need for connection or safety or dialogue or openness. And then the next point is like, what's the request? So if I have a need for safety, maybe my request is that we do this when we're communicating, that we say some words of appreciation before we start the dialogue. And you don't have to do that, but it's inviting you into the conversation instead of saying, I'm right and you're wrong.
That's really, really interesting. So what I'm hearing from you is asking people to really do some introspection, really look at what's going on in themselves in the moment, and how that might be reflected by how they react or respond to any number of situations that are going on in their life, and why they're responding that way. Maybe it's something that's already going on inside themselves. I think, what's interesting, David, is in this fast-paced world that we live in, doing and spending the time to really kind of look within is something I think, well, I just think we need to do it a lot more. And I think it probably would help us to be better communicators, and to really help build relationships. It seems like I was talking with a good friend of mine just earlier this afternoon, and he has stopped communicating with so many different people, coworkers, family, even family, just because they're so divided on where they think the world should be going and what should be happening in the world today. And I think that's really, really unfortunate. I mean, these are close people that he's loved for either his whole life, with family and friends that he's been friends with for more than a decade.
It's so
So,
true.
yeah, no, go ahead. What were you gonna say?
I was just going to say, I mean, I'm dealing with that in my own family, tensions of, how we're dealing with this whole pandemic, and, having different strategies, and coming from a natural health background and understanding the immune system and the body. I have one perspective and some family members have others. And how do I have curiosity and empathy for their view, which is different than mine? And it's definitely a challenge. I mean, I think every single person is being challenged right now. And there's actually so much beauty in these challenges that are going by. I mean, as Americans, like, we've lived in such comfort for so long. I think this is one of the first times where every single person in this country and around the world is being challenged out of their comfort zone. And there's huge transformation potential in this. I mean, it's like, where the bigger the pain, the bigger the need behind that, and the bigger the potential for conflict. But if we realize that the bigger the conflict, the more that essential that need is for that person. That's something that I have to remember all the time when I'm sometimes get in some conflicts with loved ones, is that there's just a big need behind that conflict. And how can I have empathy for them and come back to what is it that we can relate to, instead of where do we have division? And it's not that we don't talk about it. And that's what I love about Marshall's work. It's not about avoiding conflict. It's actually about diving into conflict, because that's where the real connection, growth, intimacy comes from, is like when we do dive into that. And so that's something that I constantly have to remember, is how can I have empathy for people, even when, one of the things that gets me or triggers me is like this idea that, like, you are responsible for my health and vice versa. It's like, where is the personal responsibility for, taking care of our health? Like, and this has been a historic thing of like us procrastinating on our health, or not doing self-care, or not eating foods that are beneficial for us, not getting the health support that we need. And so, there's so much blaming. And so, but underneath that is just a need for safety. And so I can have empathy for people even when they're pointing the finger, and blaming and doing that kind of stuff.
I think you said something really interesting. So when you're in the midst of a conflict with somebody that or maybe you don't, in that moment, feeling empathy for them and where they're coming from, when normally in that situation, there's anger and frustration that's bubbling up. That's a very different emotional response in terms of what it's doing, specifically to the nervous system that we were talking about earlier. Could you maybe unpack a little bit what's the difference? What is happening when you become empathetic to what this person is saying, and kind of opening yourself up to that, versus really becoming angry and even more frustrated by their perspectives, which are contrary to your own?
Yeah, I love the question. So what's happening with conflict versus empathy, and kind of those two different dynamics? Well, let's start with the idea that, we have our physical body, but, on a quantum level, this body is actually, it doesn't start here. It actually comes way out. There's actually an energetic field around us. And that is really our heart, as you know, is emanating this vibration. And so, when we are in contraction, we are in conflict. We're actually literally contracting that energetic field around us. And you've all been around people that are magnetic, that just being around them is vital. You feel more alive. They have more energy. That's literally their field that's impacting us and raising our vibration up. And so when we tap into that empathy, we're raising our vibration up to a higher vibration of expansion. And that's literally one of the most sophisticated guidance systems in the universe, is this system. And so, when we're feeling good, we're in expansion. When we're feeling crappy, we're in contraction. And so that's a great indicator of how we can live our lives, of, moving towards expansion in our bodies, and going towards, gratitude, empathy, compassion. These are things that expand us and help connect us with people, and help, create more connection around us.
Absolutely. At the Heart Focused Life, we talk a lot about that energetic field that we create. It's an electromagnetic field that is originating from the heart and actually can be measured about 2 meters away from the body in any direction. And just like you said, it expands significantly with regenerative emotions like appreciation, gratitude, love, for another person, and empathy, like as we were just mentioning just a minute ago.
And I'll
So
just, I'll just add to that, Bruce Lipton talks about epigenetics. He's a former medical professor at University of Berkeley in Wisconsin. And he basically talks about how, like, those emotions of gratitude, love, empathy, compassion literally change our aging process. They slow down our aging process. The telomere is at the end of the DNA. And so we only have kind of so many kind of recycle, copies of these DNA patterns that we can do. And so those emotions literally kind of slow that process down and improve our aging process. So we are younger, we're more vital, we emanate more vitality and health. And so, literally, it doesn't have to be expensive. There's all these hacks that we can do, going to bed every night and writing a list of like things you're grateful for until you get emotional and even teary-eyed. That literally is expanding that vibration and energy that you have for vitality and health.
And not only that, I noticed when I started doing a gratitude journal, that I actually sleep a lot deeper. I probably, I don't know, about 2, 3 weeks after I started doing it, I started dreaming and actually remembering my dreams, which was kind of a new thing for me. I went for a huge part of my life, several years, where I knew I kind of dreamed and I would kind of wake up but I didn't really remember anything. And for some reason, at least for me, after I started doing a gratitude journal, after I started really thinking about everything really small and really big in my life that I'm grateful for, I just started remembering my dreams, and I started waking up refreshed and just ready to jump out of bed rather than wanting to just hit the alarm and kind of roll over for another 5, 10 minutes or another hour sometimes. Yeah, that's incredible that you bring that up.
And
Well,
and on top of that, our bodies were meant to be healthy. They were meant to rejuvenate. We were meant to wake up in the morning and feel good. So if you're waking up and you feel crappy and you feel kind of achy, that's a sign your body's not detoxifying. It's a sign your vitality, you're not refreshing from that sleep. And sleep is one of the most powerful healing agents out there. And so extremely important. So that is a very simple hack that people can do to kind of improve their sleep.
and so what is going on maybe in the nervous system while you're getting some deep sleep? What are some of the functions that are happening that when you go to sleep full of gratitude, full of empathy, and you wake up full of energy? Why did that happen versus when you wake up and you're groggy and you don't want to get out of bed and it's really hard to think and function in life?
Well, you're literally kind of revamping your neurology. Imagine, I'm going to use an example of like someone who's, watching TV on the couch. They're, we've all been in this situation, they're maybe kind of feeling lazy. They're feeling a little apathetic. They're not excited about life. all these things, which are just kind of normal about being human. We all go through them at different stages. But if they think of a person, maybe they're really excited about being around, that can instantaneously change what happened there. It's literally what neurology is firing. And so there's a saying in neurology that, what fires together wires together. And that all that means is that when we focus on certain things, it's changing our neurology. Those neurology lines, pathways are getting fired. They're getting used. And when they get used, they enhance in size. And so they enhance in resilience, and those pathways become more efficient. And so when we are tapping into those things that we're grateful for, all of a sudden, we're not thinking about the pain we're in. And David Osprey also talks about this. I mean, many different neurologists talk about this in a way where if we're constantly thinking about the pain and how much the pain is terrible and how it's wrecking our life, we're rewiring that pathway. And we actually can become addicted to that kind of like complaining even. And there was some really interesting research by Candace Pert, who looked at like the neuropeptides that go into that addiction. It's literally like a morphine fix we're getting from, overeating, or from complaining, or from, being addicted to porn, or, whatever the addiction is, or, substance abuse. We get addicted to that pathway and that escapism. And it all really comes down to like a form of escapism. When we start focusing on what we're grateful for, all of a sudden, wow, I actually have hope. And when there's hope, we don't have to escape it as much. And there's a great study I love, and it's called the Rat Park study. It's a beautiful study. And they had these rats that were in captivity. And each rat had the opportunity to have, I think, 3 different water drips. One was just plain water, and then it was maybe a morphine drip, and then a heroin drip, and then a cocaine drip. So, in the cage, all these rats became addicted to these different substances. Then they let them out into this big park, and they had the same water opportunity. So they had, the plain water and then the drug infested water. And in the free environment, none of the rats went back to the drugs. That when our bodies feel free, we don't need to escape. And it can be as simple as tapping into that one tiny seed of gratitude. Wow, the sun is shining today. Wow, I'm alive. There's a singer that says, I'm 3 feet above the ground. And, it can be the simplest things that tap us into that small opening that breaks us out of that depression, or that sadness, or whatever it is, and allows us to just kind of be present with whatever's going on in our body, and realize that it's a cycle that will, just as it's coming here, it will also go away.
So that's really interesting. You said neurons that fire together wire together. And so when you're thinking about something that makes you angry, something that makes you frustrated, and that's what you're thinking over and over and over again, you're creating this like super highway and so that pathway becomes, a very common road that you're going to. And when you switch to thinking about those little things that you're grateful for, that pathway, that road, that super highway that you've created, that is focused on pain and anger and frustration, starts to degrade. And you start to build up this new pathway, and the addiction becomes really kind of looking towards things that really bring you gratitude and happiness and joy in life. I don't know, what else could you say about that, and maybe some ways that we can help our listeners to really develop those new joyful pathways and step away from these old habits that are really continuously bringing them down?
So, I think one of the tendencies with people kind of starting this work is that they can think, oh, I'm just going to be happy. And they literally try to suppress their feeling of sadness, their feeling of anger, their feeling of frustration. All these emotions are actually very healthy. And it's important to just sit with them, be with them, express them. And so I don't want to give the impression that like, just think happy thoughts. There's a great mentor of mine, Dr. John DeMartini, who talked about how he was going to have all these positive affirmations. And so over a year, he was, kind of OCD about it. He literally wrote in his journal every day, how many times he recited his affirmations. And then he recorded, good things, bad things that happened. And he said, overall, I'm going to have more positive things happen to me in my life doing all these affirmations. And so he literally recorded positive, negative events that happened in his life. And I think he did this for a couple, maybe even 2 years. And at the end of the thing, he was like, okay, overall, it's going to be more positive. At the end of the year or 2 years, he tallied them all up and he equaled that number. He did all the math and it equaled exactly 0. And he was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And he actually realized that this is the perfect balance of life, of positive and negatives, or what we perceive as positive and negatives. And so, having the latitude to realize that things are cyclical like this, and that, if we have a big enough perspective, we can have the realization that it's all part of the perfect balance, and actually have gratitude for, even our nemesis or someone who's challenging us so much that we might even be hateful of them or angry, frustrated, all those things. They're actually a teacher. And so, like I said, if the perspective is big enough, we start to see the perfection in our life, in the world, and not be fixated on these terrible things that are happening to us. And it's actually part of our training of our neurology. And let me just say this, because we've kind of forgotten this as a society, I think, is that, bacteria, viruses, these are actually important things for us to get exposed to. They actually boost our immune system. We've forgotten this. And that when a healthy immune system is an immune system that is actually exposed to many different pathogens, viruses. We're exposed to deadly pathogens every day, and a healthy immune system can fight that off. And so there's some very simple things that people can do right now under COVID that, will help your immune system function. And they're extremely cheap and they're very successful. Just getting sunlight, vitamin D, if you're in cold climates, taking D3, 5 to 10,000 IUs a day. If you get sick or you have COVID, take 50,000 IUs of vitamin D every day, and that can flush out that virus. Vitamin C regularly, zinc, vitamin A, which helps the absorption of D. So, D, A, C, and zinc. Those are some really simple little things that you can be doing that are going to boost your immune system and make sure you're healthy.
That's really interesting, because that is very much outside, I'd say, the narrative that we hear every single day on the news, on the radio, on the internet. There's so little that's being talked about boosting the immune system. Let's kind of unpack what you were saying at first. Being exposed to bacteria, to viruses. That goes back to the age-old practice of letting your children go play in the mud, go play outside. Why have we done that for millennia? We're getting an update. We're getting that bacterial and that viral update that's boosting our immune system. And instead, I think a lot of the narrative has been stay inside, don't go outside, stay away, instead of doing things that we know and have known for many, many years are going to actually boost our immune system. So getting those natural vitamins from their original sources, as often as you can. Like you said, getting your vitamin D by going outside and getting the sunlight. And if you if you live in an area where the days are really short during the winter, or it's just so cold that you go outside and you are covered from head to toe, it's really hard to absorb a lot of that vitamin D. It's hard to get it, and um, taking in those different vitamins, um, a lot of what I have learned, and I help others to learn myself, is getting a lot of those vitamins from those natural sources, from the diet that we eat, from eating leafy greens and a variety of other vegetables, fruits, and getting your meats from the most natural wild caught or grass fed sources, so that you can build those vitamins in the way that nature intended us to get them. Not to say that taking vitamins isn't an excellent substitute for when it's difficult to get those. A lot of people live in what is often referred to today as a food desert. So it's difficult for them to find a lot of nutritious food in its original packaging. A carrot, lettuce, a tomato that has come from a farm close by. So, what are maybe a few other things before we wrap up today that can really help people to boost their immune system, to boost their nervous system, to keep them in their parasympathetic, and boost their health and well-being overall?
Great question. So literally, I mean, there's thousands, tens of thousands of things that you can do to boost your health. There's thousands and thousands of vitamins. How do we know which vitamins to take, how much vitamins to take? Everyone is kind of unique in some way. But I guess what I want my underlying message to be, all these things are great for helping our health, but the one thing that controls everything in the body is our neurology. And yet, how often do we get our nervous system checked? Not very often. And so it's vitally important to, no matter what, and especially if you're under more stresses, to get your nervous system checked, to see if there's any interference in your nervous system. And if you want, then invest in, getting care that will help support that. And chiropractic, in my view, does an amazing job at helping the body be able to be in alignment and to be able to function, adapt, which is what it was meant to do. It wasn't meant to avoid all stresses in life, to, live the perfect, life in the monastery, away from all, of society. It was meant to be out in the world. And so chiropractic helps you do that. It helps, athletes perform better. It helps, babies be able to be healthier, even just, we didn't really even talk about this, but a lot of people don't even know that babies can get adjusted and have their nervous system checked. But after birth, it can be a traumatic thing. And so checking to see how their alignment is, because it can get off after the birth process, and it can affect their breathing, can affect their digestion, colic babies, earaches, all these things can impact even, day or two old babies. And so, I literally offer care for people in their first, days of life, because it's so important to get them checked to see, is there interference in their life that maybe go unchecked might cause big things down the line. Getting your nervous system checked, also trusting that your body is this incredible vehicle for health and that it wants to be healthy. Go into the gratitude line, go into those emotions that you want to expand in your life, tap into them. Go into the breath. The breath is one of the most unsung heroes in our health. Of just taking that deep breath, always coming back to that. We're all gonna kind of start to get a little bit agitated throughout the day, and that's okay. Just, kind of move the body, breathe more. I love Tony Robbins when he talks about transformation. He says, with change, if you want, the bigger the change you want, the bigger the movement you need. And that means in life, in movement, in breath. The Eastern Vedics basically talked about pranayama is movement of life force, of spirit.
Mm.
And so when we breathe, we bring in more life force into our body. When we get adjusted, we actually can breathe more deeply. When we move our bodies, we can breathe more deeply. And that has an impact immediately on your health. And so just remember that your body has the power to transform, and you have all the tools you need to be able to do that right now. So what I wanted to offer people is, a free phone call. And if they have any, persistent health questions that they're suffering with, or maybe their loved ones are suffering with, please give me a call. My number is 970-946-9361. That's 970-946-9361. I'm happy to talk to you and give any insight that I have on, what's going on, and maybe give you some tips and tricks that you can do to kind of overcome that obstacle with you or any loved one that is maybe going through something. So
That's absolutely incredible. Just before we go, is there something that we could do right as we're ending this interview that can snap us into building the immune system? Some exercise that we could do right away?
Yeah. So I want you to think of when you're sitting, a lot of times as we get tired, we start to slouch. So
yeah.
Just bringing the head up, breathing in the chest here, rolling the shoulders back, tucking the head back. It almost should feel a little bit awkward at first. When you do that, you're literally helping stimulate all those things that we talked about today. And you can bring your arms out like this. Tony Robbins talks about priming. So breathing in with your arms up, and then bring your arms down. And if you do that for a couple minutes or even a minute, that literally brings more vitality and energy into your body. So that's one quick thing you can do every day, or as much as you want to, that will make a big, big difference.
David, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to talk to all of us and give us these tips, these tricks, and giving out your phone number, offering to help. I just have so much gratitude for you. Thank you so much. I took a lot myself from having this interview with you. Thank you.
Tomas, it was an honor and privilege, and I look forward to more conversations.
All right. I look forward to it as well.
Okay, take care, buddy.
See you later, man.